Anakin Skywalker entered the Supreme Chancellor's office with his heart racing. His footsteps echoed in the heavy silence of that place that had always seemed grand to him, but now felt sinister. Palpatine was standing with his back turned, observing the nighttime landscape of Coruscant through the wide windows. When he turned around, his smile was serene, almost paternal, but Anakin could sense something deeper, something dark pulsing beneath that facade. The young Jedi activated his lightsaber, the blue blade illuminating the environment with a ghostly glow. Palpatine sighed, as if disappointed with a rebellious son, and said in a calm voice, "You want to kill me, Anakin. I sense this in you." Anakin held the saber more firmly, his voice trembling slightly as he responded, "You are under arrest, Chancellor. You are a Sith Lord." His eyes burned with a mixture of anger and disappointment, feeling betrayed by someone he had trusted for years. Palpatine took a step forward, his hands extended in an almost pleading gesture, and his voice carried a persuasive urgency. "Anakin, don't do this. Help me use your anger to become more powerful than any Jedi." He paused, letting the words penetrate the young man's confused mind. "Even to save Padme," he added, knowing exactly where to touch Anakin's deepest wound. The Jedi hesitated for a brief instant, visions of Padme dying returning to haunt him. But something inside him strengthened, and he said firmly, "Surrender." Palpatine's smile disappeared instantly. From beneath his robes, he drew a red lightsaber that cut through the air with a menacing hiss. The fight began with brutal ferocity, Palpatine attacking with refined and deadly technique that made Dooku seem like merely an apprentice. He spun and leaped with supernatural agility, his strikes aimed at vital points with surgical precision. Anakin retreated initially, defending himself from the relentless attacks, but soon found his rhythm. He was at the peak of his abilities, stronger and faster than he had ever been. Each movement flowed naturally, as if the Force guided every muscle in his body. He had made the right decision, and this gave him a clarity he had never experienced before. The combat intensified, the lightsabers creating luminous patterns in the air as they clashed repeatedly. Palpatine tried to unbalance him with venomous words. "You are wasting your potential, Anakin. You could be the most powerful of all." But Anakin no longer allowed himself to be seduced. He blocked a particularly violent strike and, using the Force, pushed Palpatine against the wall. The Sith Lord recovered quickly, but Anakin was already upon him. With a precise movement, the Jedi managed to disarm his opponent, the red saber flying through the air and falling too far to be reached. Palpatine, desperate, extended his hands and bluish rays of energy surged from his fingertips. Anakin raised his saber to block the rays, but Palpatine intensified the attack. The energy crackled in the air, filling the office with the smell of burned ozone. Anakin felt pain coursing through his arms as he held the saber, but he did not retreat. Step by step, he advanced against the electrical storm, his determination unshakable. The rays began to deform his face, leaving marks that would burn for days, but he continued advancing. Finally, when he was just a few meters from Palpatine, the Sith Lord could no longer maintain the attack and collapsed, exhausted. Anakin fell to his knees beside him, every muscle in his body screaming with pain, but alive and victorious. With trembling hands, Anakin activated his communicator. "Master Windu, I've arrested the Chancellor. He is the Sith Lord we were looking for." Minutes later, Mace Windu arrived accompanied by other Jedi Masters, their faces a mixture of shock and determination. They arrested Palpatine with special handcuffs that blocked the use of the Force and took him under heavy escort to Coruscant's maximum security prison. Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi returned from their missions upon receiving the extraordinary news, barely able to believe that the war finally had an outcome. Days later, in a private hospital, Padme gave birth to twins, Luke and Leia, with Anakin holding her hand throughout the entire process. He looked at his children with tears in his eyes, realizing that his nightmares had not become reality. Before the decisive meeting of the Jedi Council, Anakin asked to speak. His voice was firm, though laden with emotion. "Masters, I need to confess something. I am married to Senator Padme Amidala. These are our children." The silence that followed was deafening. Mace Windu closed his eyes, clearly disappointed, while Ki-Adi-Mundi shook his head in disapproval. Plo Koon remained impassive behind his mask. Yoda, however, looked at Anakin with ancient and wise eyes. "Honest you were, young Skywalker. Appreciated this is, but against the code you went." The council voted, and only Obi-Wan defended his former Padawan, arguing passionately that Anakin had saved the Republic and resisted the dark side. But it was not enough. Anakin was expelled from the Jedi Order. Anakin left the temple for the last time, his steps heavy but not completely defeated. He was devastated at losing the only life he had known, but looking at Padme and his children, he found a new purpose. They traveled to Naboo, seeking peace away from the tumultuous politics of Coruscant. The weeks passed quietly, with Anakin helping to care for the babies and trying to process everything that had happened. Then, one morning, Bail Organa sent an urgent message to Padme. She listened to the words with growing surprise. "Padme, Palpatine was tried and found guilty and is serving a life sentence, as we expected. You need to return. The Senate wants you to run for Chancellor." Padme looked at Anakin, who nodded encouragingly. Together, with the babies, they returned to Coruscant, where Padme was elected by an overwhelming majority to lead the Republic into its new era. The relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker strengthened in ways neither of them had imagined possible. The fact that Obi-Wan had been the only master to defend him before the Jedi Council created a bond of loyalty and gratitude that transcended even the ties between master and apprentice they already shared. They met regularly, sometimes at Anakin's apartment in Coruscant, other times in discreet cantinas where they could talk without being observed. Obi-Wan never expressed regret for his defense, even having faced veiled criticism from other masters. For him, Anakin had proven his worth by resisting Palpatine and choosing the path of light when many would have succumbed. Anakin, in turn, saw Obi-Wan not only as his former master, but as the brother he had always been, and this friendship would become crucial in the years that followed. Padme Amidala assumed the office of Supreme Chancellor in a grand ceremony at the Galactic Senate. Her inaugural speech echoed through the corridors of power, promising reconstruction, justice, and lasting peace after years of devastating conflict. She faced monumental challenges: systems destroyed by war, economies in collapse, and mistrust between worlds that had fought on opposite sides. But Padme was determined and incredibly competent, working tirelessly to unite the fragmented galaxy. Anakin supported her whenever possible, offering advice when she needed to vent about the pressures of office. She had become the leader the Republic needed, someone who understood both politics and the human cost of war. Her first act as Chancellor was to establish reconciliation commissions to judge war crimes from both sides with justice and impartiality. While the Republic and the Separatists fought the civil war that was finally coming to an end, in the depths of the unknown regions, another player observed galactic events with strategic interest. Thrawn was serving in the Chiss Ascendancy, specifically in the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet, protecting his people against threats that the known galaxy didn't even suspect existed. He was a brilliant officer, respected for his incomparable tactical mind and his ability to predict enemy movements by studying their art and culture. Thrawn had observed the emergence of what would be the beginning of Palpatine's empire with calculated interest, seeing in that authoritarian structure the only force potentially capable of resisting the extragalactic threats he knew were approaching. The discipline, military organization, and concentrated power of an empire represented, in his cold analysis, the best defense for the galaxy. With the sudden fall of Palpatine and the rise of a more democratic but fragmented New Republic, Thrawn saw his strategic hopes crumble. Thrawn made a decision that would shock his Chiss superiors. He exiled himself, not out of loyalty to Palpatine specifically, but because he believed that the Chancellor's imprisonment would mean chaos and the inevitable fragmentation of the galaxy into thousands of small factions incapable of defending themselves against greater threats. He began to architect a brilliant plan, worthy of his reputation as a master of long-term warfare. Thrawn did not think about quick victories or immediate glory. He saw decades ahead, moving pieces on a cosmic board that few could even visualize. Using his contacts in the shadows and his intimate understanding of the unknown regions, he elaborated a bold strategy: free Palpatine from prison. Not out of compassion or personal loyalty, but because the former emperor was a useful tool, someone with charisma, power in the Force, and loyal followers scattered throughout the galaxy. Together, they could rebuild something greater. The escape was executed with surgical precision. Thrawn orchestrated everything from afar, manipulating corrupt officials, creating elaborate diversions, and exploiting security flaws he had identified through meticulous analysis. On the night of the escape, coordinated explosions in different sectors of Coruscant diverted the authorities' attention, while a small but highly trained team infiltrated the maximum security prison. Palpatine, weakened but still dangerous, was extracted in a matter of minutes. When the alarms finally sounded, it was too late. They disappeared into the unknown regions, where Thrawn knew every stellar route, every hiding place, every world unmapped by the Republic's cartographers. There, far from the vigilant eyes of the new Republic and the remaining Jedi, they would begin to rebuild an army. It would be a slow process, requiring years of planning and careful recruitment, but Thrawn was patient. The years passed with a deceptive tranquility in Coruscant. Luke Skywalker grew up as a curious and energetic boy, demonstrating sensitivity to the Force from a very young age. When he turned 5, Anakin decided it was time to begin his training, teaching him the fundamentals of emotional control and meditation that he himself had learned at the Jedi Temple. Anakin could not offer formal training from the Order, but he could transmit the principles that Obi-Wan had taught him. Leia, on the other hand, showed more interest in her mother's work, accompanying Padme whenever possible and absorbing the complexities of galactic politics with sharp intelligence. The two children were different in temperament, but both carried the extraordinary heritage of their parents. Anakin found a new purpose doing missions alongside Obi-Wan, even though he was outside the Jedi Order. When his friend and former master asked for help, he responded without hesitation, using his abilities to protect the innocent and combat emerging threats. They formed a formidable duo, complementing each other perfectly in combat and trusting one another implicitly. Obi-Wan appreciated having Anakin by his side again, even if under different circumstances than they had imagined during the war. These missions kept Anakin connected to the purpose that had always defined him, while also allowing him to return to his family at the end of each day. He had found a balance that seemed impossible years ago, dividing himself between the warrior he had always been and the father and husband he had chosen to be. But in the distant shadows, forces they couldn't even imagine were already moving, preparing for the next act of a conflict that had not yet truly ended. More than a decade had passed since Palpatine's imprisonment and subsequent escape, and the galaxy had changed profoundly. Luke Skywalker, now a young man of 18, had become an extraordinary Jedi, trained by his father outside the traditional protocols of the Order. He possessed the same natural connection to the Force as Anakin, but with a more balanced temperament, a serenity that reminded one of Obi-Wan Kenobi. His green lightsaber shone like a beacon of hope whenever he wielded it, and his abilities impressed even the most skeptical masters of the Council. Anakin saw in his son not just a reflection of himself, but something better, someone who had learned from his father's mistakes without having to commit them personally. Leia Skywalker followed a different but equally remarkable path, becoming the youngest senator in Naboo's history at 18. She had inherited her mother's political passion and her father's iron determination, becoming a powerful voice in the Senate that defended social justice and diplomacy, but never at the cost of galactic security. The fragile peace that Padme had worked tirelessly to build began to crumble when the first disturbing information arrived from the unknown regions. Intelligence agents reported sightings of massive military fleets being built in secret shipyards, and rumors whispered about an unlikely alliance between Palpatine and a brilliant military strategist named Thrawn. The information was fragmented at first, difficult to verify, but sufficiently alarming to require immediate investigation. Padme convened emergency meetings with military leaders and Jedi Masters, trying to assess the extent of the threat. Obi-Wan and Yoda, now extremely elderly but still perceptive, expressed deep concern. Mace Windu, who had become the de facto leader of the Jedi Council, acknowledged that the Republic had become complacent during the years of relative peace. They had underestimated Palpatine, believing that his imprisonment would have permanently broken his power. This had been a catastrophic error. As more reports arrived, the complete picture began to form, and it was terrifying. Palpatine had done more than simply gather a conventional army. He had actively searched for Force-sensitive individuals in remote worlds, in the lowest levels of Coruscant, in forgotten colonies, and even among prisoners and outcasts that the Republic had ignored. Using promises of power, revenge, and purpose, he recruited and trained them, establishing a kind of Sith order, a distorted and dark version of what the Jedi represented. They were not traditional apprentices in the ancient sense, but fanatical warriors imbued with the dark side, each capable of facing multiple adversaries. Some reports suggested there were dozens of them, scattered throughout Thrawn's fleets. The information arrived through defectors and spies who risked everything to warn the Republic of what was coming. Padme knew she could not keep this secret, not when the threat was of this magnitude. She convened an emergency session of the Galactic Senate, the galleries packed with representatives from thousands of worlds. Leia was at her side on the central podium, a supportive presence as Padme made the announcement that would change everything. Her voice echoed through the vast circular hall. "Senators, I face you today with grave news. The former Emperor Palpatine has not only escaped from prison years ago, but has been working in the shadows to build a new army." Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. She continued, her voice firm despite the gravity. "He has allied himself with a military strategist known as Thrawn and established what we can only describe as a Sith order, composed of Force sensitives corrupted by the dark side." The revelation caused instant turmoil. Some senators shouted in denial, others demanded immediate military action, and a few, the cowards or corrupt, began to calculate how they could align themselves with what they perceived as the winning side. Leia observed everything with analytical eyes, memorizing who reacted and how, information that would be valuable in the dark days that were approaching. The attack began only weeks later, with coordination that demonstrated Thrawn's tactical genius. Multiple fronts opened simultaneously throughout the galaxy, each chosen strategically to maximize chaos and divide the Republic's forces. Vital industrial worlds were besieged, critical hyperspace routes were blocked, and entire systems found themselves isolated from help. The speed and precision of the offensive caught many unprepared, exactly as Thrawn had planned. But the most shocking information was yet to come. Intelligence agents managed to intercept encrypted communications revealing the existence of a weapon called the Death Star, a space station the size of a small moon, capable of destroying entire planets with a single shot. The magnitude of this threat was almost incomprehensible. Palpatine had personally supervised its transport to the Outer Rim, where it would serve as his ultimate weapon of terror, a tool to subjugate entire systems through absolute fear. The mere existence of this superweapon completely changed the strategic calculations of the war. The Republic mobilized its forces with desperate urgency. The Jedi, who had spent years in relative peace, found themselves once again summoned to the front lines. Obi-Wan Kenobi led contingents in crucial battles, his experience invaluable to younger commanders. Yoda, despite his advanced age, served as strategic advisor, his ancient wisdom guiding critical decisions. Anakin Skywalker was promoted to general, a position he had held during the Clone Wars but with a crucial difference. Now he was at peace with himself, not divided between loyalties or tormented by dark visions. Luke was always by his side, father and son fighting as a perfect unit, their combat styles complementing each other naturally. The clones, many of whom had remained loyal to the Republic even after Palpatine's fall, formed the backbone of the ground forces. Thrawn's fronts advanced on several strategic planets with methodical precision. He did not seek glory or unnecessary conquest, but rather specific objectives that would weaken the Republic's ability to defend itself. Shipyards on Kashyyyk were attacked by overwhelming forces. Munitions factories on Fondor were bombed until they became smoking rubble. Communication centers on Bothawi were captured, blinding entire sectors of Republican intelligence. And on each front, Palpatine's Sith warriors sowed terror. They did not fight with the discipline of the Jedi, but with savage ferocity fueled by anger and hatred. Their red blades cut through defensive lines, and their use of the dark side created waves of fear that broke the morale of less prepared soldiers. The clashes between Jedi and Sith became legendary, epic battles that would be told for generations. Luke faced a particularly powerful opponent on Ryloth, a corrupted former Padawan whose mastery of Force lightning almost defeated him, but he prevailed through his connection to the light side. Anakin led his troops with the same bravery he had demonstrated during the Clone Wars, but now tempered with wisdom. He did not seek personal glory or allow himself to be carried away by the thirst for victory at any cost. On Christophsis, he and Luke coordinated a brilliant counterattack that repelled 3 waves of Sith invaders, saving millions of civilians. Obi-Wan, fighting on another front on Felucia, faced 2 Sith Knights simultaneously. Mace Windu led an elite task force that hunted the most dangerous Sith agents, eliminating them before they could cause massive destruction. Yoda, though physically limited by his extreme age, used battle meditation to coordinate Jedi efforts throughout the galaxy, his mind touching those of his companions through the Force. Connected we all are. Allow fear to divide us, we must not. But even with all these efforts, the Death Star loomed in the shadows like a sword about to fall, and everyone knew that while it existed, true victory would remain out of reach. The war had only begun, and its outcome remained terrifyingly uncertain. Through meticulous intelligence work and interrogations of captured prisoners, Anakin and Luke discovered vital information about a secret base on Korriban, the ancient homeworld of the Sith. The planet had been abandoned for millennia, but reports suggested that Palpatine had chosen this symbolic place as his headquarters. It made sense on a sinister level. Korriban breathed the dark side, its very atmosphere impregnated with centuries of obscure rituals. Anakin took the information directly to Padme and the Jedi Council, proposing a coordinated attack that could eliminate the enemy leadership in one stroke. Mace Windu initially hesitated, suspecting a trap, but Obi-Wan supported the plan. Yoda, whose health had visibly deteriorated, agreed with a weak voice. End this war, we must. Much suffering there has been already. The Jedi fleet emerged from hyperspace above Korriban in an impressive attack formation. Dozens of warships immediately faced fierce resistance from automatic defenses. On the surface, ground forces landed under heavy fire, establishing positions around the main temple. The Jedi led the charge, their lightsabers deflecting shots as they advanced. The Sith warriors emerged from the shadows of the ancient temples, their red blades ignited. The clash between the 2 orders was explosive, light against darkness in its purest form. While the main forces kept the Sith occupied, Anakin and Luke infiltrated the temple through a side entrance. The corridors were narrow and oppressive, the walls covered with ancient carvings that seemed to whisper dark secrets. They advanced deeper, eliminating guards when necessary, until they reached a massive chamber in the heart of the temple. There, meditating on a throne of black stone, was Palpatine. He opened his yellowed eyes and smiled. "Skywalker, father and son, how appropriate that you come to me." Palpatine stood up, his presence in the dark side filling the chamber like invisible poison. Anakin activated his lightsaber. "It's over, Palpatine. Your war ends here." The Sith Lord laughed. "Over? Fool. This has only just begun." He attacked with surprising speed, his red saber cutting through the air in a deadly arc. Anakin blocked the strike while Luke moved to flank, but Palpatine used the Force to push him against the wall. The battle between Anakin and Palpatine was fierce and relentless. Palpatine attacked with the accumulated fury of decades of frustrated planning, each strike meant to kill. Anakin defended and counterattacked with the experience of countless battles. The blades clashed at a rapid pace, sparks flying each time they met. Palpatine tried to unbalance him. "You could have been so powerful, Anakin. You could have ruled the galaxy by my side." But Anakin did not respond to the provocations. Meanwhile, Luke had recovered and now faced a wave of Sith warriors who invaded the chamber to defend their master. The young Jedi fought with grace and efficiency, his green saber protecting his father's flank while eliminating enemies one by one. Palpatine suddenly retreated and extended his hands. Bluish lightning of Sith energy exploded from his fingertips, more powerful than Anakin remembered. The agony coursed through his body as he raised his saber to block, but the intensity was overwhelming. Anakin fell to his knees, his muscles convulsing. Luke turned at hearing his father's cry of pain and, with fierce determination, struck down the last Sith warriors between them. With a cry of defiance, Anakin found strength within himself and began to rise against the electrical storm, advancing step by step. When he was close, he channeled all the force and pushed Palpatine back. Luke finally reached the position and, together, they blocked the renewed lightning. The energy ricocheted and struck Palpatine with devastating force, consuming him until he finally collapsed. With Palpatine dead, the cohesion of enemy forces began to fragment rapidly, local commanders questioning their orders and some even openly deserting. But Thrawn was too much of a strategist to simply crumble in the face of adversity. He consolidated all his remaining forces around the Death Star, transforming the superweapon into his last fortress and symbol of resistance. The Republic mobilized its entire fleet for a final decisive attack, knowing there could be no true peace while that monstrosity existed threatening entire worlds. The battle that followed was the largest of the war, perhaps the largest the galaxy had witnessed in generations. Thousands of ships engaged in space around the colossal station, the void being illuminated by countless explosions and laser fire that created a terrifying spectacle. Anakin, still recovering from his wounds from Korriban, but absolutely refusing to sit out this final battle, coordinated fighter squadrons from his capital ship, his calm voice guiding pilots through the chaos. Luke led an elite squadron, pilots he had personally trained, with the nearly impossible objective of penetrating the Death Star's massive defenses and destroying its vulnerable central reactor. Luke flew with supernatural precision, the Force guiding each maneuver as he dodged defensive fire that vaporized other fighters around him. Anakin, monitoring Luke's progress through sensors and sensing his danger through their deep connection in the Force, made an instant decision. He left his command post, personally took control of an interceptor fighter, and dove directly into the heart of the most intense battle. Father and son now flew in close formation, covering each other instinctively as they rapidly approached the final target, their minds connected through the Force as if they were one. Luke concentrated completely, his breathing becoming calm and regular as he blocked out all external distractions. He turned off his targeting computers, trusting only the Force to guide him in that crucial moment. When that moment came, he fired his torpedoes with absolute conviction. The projectiles flew true through the impossible opening and impacted the reactor at the center of the Death Star. The explosion began instantly at the heart of the station, a devastating chain reaction that spread rapidly through all its massive and interconnected systems. The war finally and truly had ended. The following months were of reconstruction, mourning, and also cautious celebration. The galaxy counted its immense losses, but also celebrated the victory of light over darkness. Yoda, who had remained in deep meditation during the final phases of the war, died peacefully in his sleep shortly after the victory, his body disappearing and becoming one with the Force as only the greatest masters could achieve. His death marked the end of an era that had lasted centuries. The Jedi Council met in solemn session to decide the future of the Order, and it was Mace Windu who made the surprising proposal. Anakin Skywalker should be called back to the Order and named Grand Master. As Grand Master, he fundamentally reformed the Jedi Order, abolishing the prohibition on relationships and establishing new training protocols that emphasized emotional balance instead of suppression of feelings. Padme continued as Chancellor, working with her husband to build a more just galaxy. Leia remained in the Senate as her mother's natural successor, while Luke became one of the most respected instructors of the new Jedi Order. Anakin Skywalker, once destined to bring balance through destruction, finally brought it through wisdom, reform, and love, fulfilling the prophecy in a way that no one could have predicted.